Hello everybody, Yom Tov, and I hope everybody's well today, or as well as they can be. I'm afraid this sciatica hasn't quite got me out of its grips just yet. You know, from the last couple of days it hasn't been exactly great, but as anybody will tell you who's ever suffered from sciatica, that sometimes, you know, it likes to still dig its teeth in while it's still got a bit of power, and, you know, you've just got to be very, very careful how you move and how you sit, how you turn, that sort of thing. So, that's what I'm doing exactly. I'm trying to be very, very careful how I sit, how I turn, if I bend forward, or like trying to wash my hair, stuff like that, you know. Anyway, I wanted to let you know that I'm thinking of changing things around a bit, and instead of having set days to do certain things, I am going to be doing set things on certain days. But I've got some new ideas that I want to put into place, so I'll let you know about that in good time. Just things to entertain you, and to give you other things to think about, you know. Anyway, like I said, I hope you're all doing well. This is your true crime video, and unlike the others that I've done for you up to now, I've always had to use my laptop and read from what I've found on the laptop. And I did say ages ago that I was not ready to talk about this particular case because of, well, just the horrendous acts that were performed by this person. But I feel that I know enough about it now to be able to bring it to you from my perspective while keeping to the facts, and try not to let my own feelings cloud my telling of this story. Like I say, all the crimes that I talk about, you know, are obviously real. They're not sort of made for TV or anything like that. They are all real, and, you know, I do try to find cases that you might not have heard about. But I don't know why, but this particular case has been weighing on my mind an awful lot, especially over the past week and a half. And I just thought that now's the time for me to talk to you about it. So, looking at the clock, I'm going to start now after waffling for a bit. So here goes. Today I'm going to be talking about the Watts case. I'm fairly sure that most of you would have heard about Chris Watts and his wife Shanann and their daughters Bella and Celeste and their unborn baby boy Nico. If some of you haven't heard about it, then I'm going to tell you to you now. Give you a bit of background. Shanann, it looked like her name was Shannon, but she wanted it as Shanann. She came from a loving family. Her dad was called Frankie, her mum was called Sandra, she was known as Sandy, and she had a younger brother, Frankie Jr., and they were called the Ruscheks, the Ruschek family. She was very, let's put it this way, Shanann was very bubbly, she was very outgoing, she was very confident. She, literally, she was the sort of person that if she set her mind to doing something, she would get it done, right? She was, you know, she could touch things, she was like the Midas touch. And she was successful in whatever she set her mind and heart to. She'd been married once before, and that didn't work out, so there she was, divorced with no children. Anyway, she is told about Chris by his cousin, who said, you know, why don't you hit him up on Facebook? I'll get him to talk to you. And she was like, well, you know, okay. Chris sent her a message on Facebook and they started talking. And anyway, these things happen. You know, the relationship developed and they met and they hit it off. And they very quickly became very attached to each other. Chris was a quiet man. He was quiet the way Shanann was outgoing. So you'd probably think, well, opposites are attracting here. His family background was, you know, where Shanann's family were very touchy-feely, huggy, that sort of thing. His family were a little bit more, I don't know how quite to describe it. I would put them as a little bit uptight. You know, not very demonstrative and what have you. His mother was called Cindy. I honestly can't remember the name of his father. I'm really sorry. It's gone out of my head now. And he had a sister called Sarah. But by nature, Chris was very quiet. And anyway, he took Shanann to meet his parents. Apparently it didn't go particularly well because Chris's mother felt that Shanann was sort of disrespectful in the way that she spoke about her son. And, you know what mothers and sons are like, you know. It's like no girl's ever good enough for their son. I should know I married an only son and I can attest to that. You know, as far as my mother-in-law was concerned, he was the second coming, you know. And nobody was good enough for him, let alone me. So I know what that's like. Anyway, to cut a long story short, Shanann did want to get along with her future in-laws. She asked them to sort out the engagement party invitations for her. She sent out 80 invitations and handed them all to her mother-in-law and her future sister-in-law. When the engagement party happened, there was only about 4 people turned up on Shanann's side, and other people turned up on Chris's side, so that was something she was upset about. Anyway, they went forward and had their wedding, and they didn't invite, well, Chris's parents refused to go. So, apart from Chris's grandmother, I think, and a cousin, nobody showed up from his side at the wedding. But apparently it was a very happy occasion. They both were very much in love. Anyway, they then went on to have Bella and a lovely little girl. That was then followed a year later by her sister Celeste, another lovely little girl. Bella was very much like her dad, quiet and, you know, contemplative and thinking a lot of things, quite shy. Celeste was more like her mum. She was very outgoing, very bubbly, you know, very happy little girl. Now, the Wattses were struggling financially, even though they were both working. Chris is working full-time at an oil refinery, and Shanann was working for a company that sold energy patches, and she was doing very, very well at that. But they were still finding it difficult to have enough money to make ends meet. They both maxed out their credit cards and they were literally financially living on the edge. So they were struggling. But for some reason, they went ahead and tried for another baby. And it was, I believe it was June 10th, I think, of 2018 that Shanann announced that, you know, she surprised Chris by wearing a t-shirt saying, "Oops, I did it again." And she gave him the pregnancy testing strip to look at. He said that was awesome, and hugged and kissed her. So it was wonderful. They were going to have another baby. He wanted to have a boy, and as it turned out, they were going to have a gender reveal. Shanann had found out that she was actually having a baby boy. So she was thrilled. But what she didn't know was, about the same time, Chris had become attracted to a fellow co-worker whose name was Nicole Kessinger. And as these things happen, co-workers, they work together, and then they're given work projects to do where they're just working together. And at the end of the day, they ended up becoming so attracted to each other that they started an affair. Now, Nicole, obviously after the fact, when she was questioned by police, she was told that Chris didn't tell her at first that he was married. Eventually he did tell her that he was married and he had 2 children, but he was in the process of going through a separation. Of course, that wasn't true, but he was withdrawing emotionally, you know, away from his wife, and Shanann was really feeling it. And she would try and get him to talk to her, and he was cold, he was distant, but, you know, his mind was invested in Nicole Kessinger. He was absolutely obsessed with her. When, you know, what got me, I think that Nicole was under the impression that Chris was going to get divorced quite soon. And she's in her 30s. She wanted to have her own family. They talked about having a family and what have you together. But apparently one afternoon she spent about 2 hours online looking up wedding dresses. Because I'm sure that he had more or less convinced her that once he was divorced they were going to marry straight away. So I'm trying very hard in my mind not to get matters all mixed up here. Like I said, Shanann is complaining that her husband's, you know, he's just not talking to her. She can't get anything out of him. She's trying to find out what's going wrong in their marriage. And he's sort of like not giving. You know, she's desperately trying to communicate, and he's just, you know, she's like putting everything into it, and it's like he's got this wall up. He just doesn't want to know. He's giving her the sort of the least amount that he can get away with. I'm sure you'll all understand that. So on the weekend of I believe the 12th and the 13th of August 2018, Shanann had to go to Arizona on a business trip for the company that she worked for the Patches. I think they were called Thrive, but I'm not sure. I'll have to go back and check that up. I'm sorry if I've got that wrong. So she went away for the weekend, And on that weekend, Chris arranged for a babysitter, and he told Shanann that he was going to arrange for a babysitter because he wanted to go and watch a game with his co-workers, and he was going to get the babysitter for the Saturday night. Of course, what he didn't tell her, the truth was that he was taking Nicole Kessinger out for a meal that cost about $60. They had salmon and all this sort of thing. And of course he kept the receipt, and of course with them having a joint bank account, everything that he would sign for, obviously Shanann would find out about. And, you know, she'd questioned him on the phone, why is this, what's going on? Sorry, prior to the weekend of the 12th and 13th of August, Shanann had spent nearly 6 weeks with her family. I believe it was in North Carolina. And for the final week, Chris had gone out there to spend the final week with his wife and the girls. But apparently everybody thought that he was very cold to Shanann, very distant, very cold and distant with the girls and what have you, and that was a cause for concern. Anyway, Shanann went away on this business trip to Arizona. Chris is spending his time with Nicole Kessinger. Shanann had phoned him 4 times, he wasn't picking up. So he sort of had to leave Nicole Kessinger and go back home, and, you know, because he had to, you know, make sure that, you know, when Shanann finally managed to catch a hold of him, that he was in the house. And I think this was something that, you know, Nicole Kessinger found particularly irksome, because she felt that she would always be the other woman, you know, and it really did irk her. So she'd said to him, look, we'll just go home and I'll see you another time. But of course, apparently it ended up that she invited him back to her apartment that night. So, anyhow, Sunday morning, and it was about between 2:30, 2:45 in the morning, Shanann is dropped off by her friend Nicole Aitchison, because they'd been on this business trip together. And she dropped Shanann off at home. Now, by this point, Shanann is 15, 16 weeks pregnant with the little boy that they decided they were going to call Nico. There's footage from the door cam that shows Shanann coming up from Nicole's car, walking up the front door, pulling out a suitcase. She looked worn out. You know, after this, she'd been on a flight, and she'd been at these conferences for nearly 2 days. The woman was absolutely worn out, and she wasn't feeling particularly well. Now, there's 2 or 3 basic scenarios of what happened next. You know, it's like he said, she said, and then there's the truth. What basically happened was Chris was asleep in bed, or so he'd said. Shanann got into bed with him. She initiated sex. They had sex, and then they went to sleep. But it was when he woke up to get ready for work, Shanann had got upset. He turned around to her and said that the relationship wasn't working. She said to him, you're cheating on me, aren't you? You've met somebody else. And I think at that point he'd sort of given up denying it to her anymore. And he'd said yes, that he was. And she was crying, and she turned and she said, you'll never see the girls again. And according to him, and what he'd said to the police, was that he had snapped. and he put his hands around his neck and he strangled her. And it was when he'd done that that he heard Bella get up out of bed, and he turned around and Bella was in the room, and Bella said, "What's the matter with Mommy?" Now, this is where it starts to get really unpleasant, because when Chris was interviewed by the detectives in February of 2019, he decided to come clean about everything that had happened. But I'll tell you that bit in a moment. He was very surprised to see Bella getting up, but I'll tell you why I was surprised, like I said, in a moment. He made some kind of statement to Bella that Mommy wasn't well, and he wrapped her up in a sheet, and this is all in front of Bella. By this point, I think Celeste had got up as well. He said that Bella particularly watched him as he sort of bumped Shanann all the way down the stairs and out into his truck, wrapped in a sheet. He then got the girls, and they were sitting on seats more or less with their feet on their mother, but they didn't realise that. He then took them out to the oil field where he worked. And he went out and he dug a shallow grave. And he more or less went to put Shanann in the grave, and she sort of rolled out of the sheet and more or less landed on her face, but in the fetal position. And he'd said that it looked at that point as if she'd given birth. Now, I want to now come back to why he was surprised at Bella being awake. Now, I have put up, obviously, at the start of this video, that there are things I need to say to you that are very upsetting. So this is one of those moments. If you don't want to hear this next bit, what I've got to say, then please keep fast forwarding the video until you're past what I've got to say. I am trying to keep the upset to an absolute minimum. What he had done was he had smothered both the little girls in their beds. And he walked away from them and said, "That's the last time I'll ever tuck them in and say goodnight to them." But he had gone back and he'd smothered. This came out in the February interview of 2019. This is what he told the police. But back on the 13th of August 2018, like I say, he got Shanann and he buried her in a shallow grave. He then got a hold of Celeste. He smothered her with a blanket. He carried her out to one of the oil tanks to climb up some like steel steps, like a walkway. And he managed to push her little body through an 8-inch hole at the top of the tanks. He then went back to his truck and Bella looked at him and she said, "Are you going to do to me what you did to Celeste?" And according to him, he nodded. Bella fought for her life. If you want to know any more of the details of that, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to look into it. But that's all I'm going to say on that. I don't think I make a very good true crime reporter, do you? Not particularly with this case. Other cases I seem to be more objective, but it's very, very hard with this particular case. He then took Bella's body, and those two little girls were so close in life. They loved each other desperately. But he separated them in death. And he went to the tank next to the one he put Celeste in. And he pushed Bella down into the next tank. And apparently it was evident what had been done, because when the police went out to check everything out, there was a tuft of her hair where he pushed her body into the tank. Anyway, it was about just after 9ish on morning of the 13th, and Shanann's friend Nicole Atkinson had been ringing her, and apparently she was supposed to go with her for a check with a gynecologist to check on things about the baby, and she couldn't get a hold of Shanann. She said she phoned the police. She said she couldn't understand it because Shanann's car was in the garage. She'd looked through the house. There was no signs of anybody there. The police called Chris. He turned up. They asked him where she could be, and he said that she'd gone on a play date with a friend and taken the kids with her. And they'd said, well, where would she have gone? Because the children's car seats are still in her car. So where would she have gone without the children's car seats? Who's the friend? Where is she? And he was just, I don't know who it is. She just said she was going on a play date. And I think it was the following day, the 14th, I mean late 13th, starting of the 14th, I think he did an interview with local police, a local television station. And if anybody's watched that, now with the benefit of hindsight, you can see how cold he is and how shifty he is, but he put out this sort of impassioned plea for her to please come home, and he wanted the girls home, how much he missed them, and well, you can imagine the rest. Anyway, the police were really become suspicious. They got into the house, they found that not only was Shanann's car still there, but her phone was still there. And I mean, she was attached to her phone. It was more or less a social lifeline. She did all her social media from her phone. She did all her work from her phone. Well, that was still there. Her purse was still there. Well, what Americans call a purse, we call a handbag. So, and what Americans call a wallet, we call a purse. So the wallet and the purse, like wallet, purse was still there. The handbag, purse were still there with all her medication, stuff like that. They couldn't understand where she would have gone and not taken Celeste's medication as well, because that was all still there. And of course, he's playing dumb, no, don't know where she's gone, and he admitted that they were having marital problems and what have you. Anyway, the police were starting to get suspicious, and they took him in for questioning. And the longer this went on, they'd asked him to do a polygraph test, which he failed. And then he asked to speak to his father. Oh, Ronnie, that was his father's name. I've remembered it now, Ronnie. He asked Ronnie to come in so he could talk to him. He told Ronnie that he had strangled Shanann and buried her body in a shallow grave out by the oil battery. And that was because he'd caught her smothering the girls. So, of course, unfortunately, Ronnie didn't get along with Shanann, and neither did his mother. Cindy didn't like Shanann at all. And I think they were only too willing to believe the worst of Shanann. So he then told the police that story. But the police, I think, were too savvy, and the FBI were far too savvy to accept that. And in the end, they broke him down, and he admitted to murdering his wife and his 2 daughters. He made a deal by the district attorney's office to avoid getting the death penalty. He admitted to the murder of his wife and his 2 daughters and his unborn son, Nico, and interfering with a body after death. He was given a 3 life sentences, plus 12 years for each of them. He was given a sentence also for Nico. They were all to run concurrently, and it basically meant that he will never get out of prison. He is there until he dies. Both families made heartbreaking statements to the judge. To hear the rush checks, it had literally torn their family to shreds. Christopher's family forgave him for what he'd done. robbing them of their 2 little granddaughters and their unborn grandson. And they still loved him and they forgave him. So then he was taken away and put in one prison, but then he had to be transferred because things weren't very good for him at the first one, so they moved him to another one in Wisconsin. And like I said, in February 2019, the detectives went out to interview him again, and they just said, you know, there's a few things that we want to run by you and double check because it was sort of crazy at the time, and we want to get some more information. And they spent 2.5 hours with him, and they managed to get him to come clean about everything, exactly what he'd done, how he'd done it. Nicole Kessinger had gone to the police and done her best to clear her name. One of the things that she did do was that I wasn't awful impressed with was she'd gone online trying to work out how much Amber Fry, who's the mistress of Scott Peterson, of the Peterson case, she wanted to know how much she had made from writing a book. So, but I don't think it would have been very well received, do you? Anyway, he gave them all the details. That's online. About exactly what he'd done to the girls and Shanann. One of the things about this case, well, I've honestly got to tell you, and I'm keeping an eye on the time, is that there are things over this case that I will never forget. Now, I know it's such a complicated case, and half an hour doesn't really cover it. And I know I'm not the fastest of talkers at the best of times. And I am in quite a lot of pain right now. But the reason, it's almost like I wanted to talk about it to help get it out of my system, because it's been weighing on me ever since I found out about it. I mean, I was watching him, I mean, at the time, at that weekend, giving, you know, interviews to the TV people, wondering where his wife had gone. And I mean, I was too, thinking, well, where on earth can she be? And then to find out all along that it was him. And it's not a nice feeling when you're hoodwinked like that. I will never, ever, ever forget watching a video of Bella singing "My Daddy Is My Hero." I can hear her little voice. I will never, ever forget what their end. I will never forget that. And I watched a special Dr. Phil. No, I'm not a great watcher of Dr. Phil, but he interviewed Shanann's family and Sandy, her mum. I think she's very intuitive, you know. She said that she could feel her daughter and she could hear her. And what I will never forget is when she said that she saw Shanann and the two little girls. And, you know, she said that Celeste went up to her and put her hands on her face and said, "Thank you so much for loving us, Nana. You loved us so much." And Bella said to her, "Guess what, Nana? I can go to Disney World anytime I like." And Sandy said to her, "Yes, that's right, Bella. You can go anytime you want." And then someone passed Shanann a baby. Sandy didn't say who it was. She said she didn't really see. But Shanann put baby Nico in her arms. And she just said, "Oh, he was so beautiful. He looked just like Frankie." And she said, feeling our daughter's spirit and seeing our little granddaughters in spirit and our grandson, I think it saved our sanity. And it brought her peace. I will never forget that as long as I live. I don't want this to sound hard or callous in any way. I'm so glad I've been able to talk about this case to you. Because apart from talking to you about it in the comments, I won't ever talk about it again. It's been a kind of like showing you a wound that I've been carrying around half open ever since I first heard about this. There are so many details that I haven't mentioned that I can't bring myself to mention. That I'm very sorry. I am not with this case. It's very, very hard not to be emotional about it. I will end with this, that there is a special place in hell for people like Chris Watts. Because he just wanted to wash everything away and start afresh with his mistress. Almost like Shanann and the girls and Nico had never happened. And he actually believes that God has forgiven him. Because God's love, and he's found, you know, he's found Christ again. And you know, he's thinking that, you know, if he gets out of prison, he might become a minister and go around and minister to other prisoners. And I'm thinking, what universe is this going to happen in? So that was my telling of the Watts case. Far from perfect. things I've forgotten, things that I have deliberately not spoken about because they're far too upsetting and too graphic. But I have been asked before if I would talk about it. I said at the time I wasn't ready, but I just felt now was the time. So I hope that I've managed to try and do Shanann and the girls and Nico some justice in telling their story. And I'm going to say thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you for being here. And I will see you again very, very soon. Take care. I love you all. See you later. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.